afternoon. We're off into the skies over Switzerland today as we take off with Swiss Air flying to and from their central hub in Zurich. Swiss International Airlines has benefited greatly from their location in Central Europe as a hub for intra-European flights, connecting Europe with the rest of the world through some 100 destinations throughout their route network. But with the airline's current business class product being almost a decade old, is it even worth trying in today's age of direct aisle access business class? Come fly with me today as we find out if Swiss Air offers a competitive and refined product in their business class cabin, or if their business class product is in some drastic need of refurbishment. We'll get to see the full spread of their route network because today we're flying on both their short haul and their long haul planes to see if it's even worth flying with Swiss Air. Come join me in the skies as I make my way back to Chicago in search of linking adventures. Today, we're starting out our journey in Stockholm's Arlanda Airport, where we're hopping on board a Swiss Air Airbus A220 for the short 2.5-hour flight down to their hub in Zurich. There, we'll spend the night before taking an early morning flight on an Airbus A330-300 westbound across the Atlantic Ocean before touching down in Chicago's O'Hare Airport almost 10 hours later. That's plenty of time for us to experience exactly what Swiss International offers when it comes to their long-haul business class product. A mid-morning departure from Stockholm's Arlanda Airport meant that I had plenty of time to catch up on some sleep before heading to the airport. Despite having a separate check-in line for business class passengers, it still took me a good 30 minutes to check in this morning despite having only 3 passengers in front of me.
I'm here at Stockholm Arlanda Airport, where I've just checked in for my first flight from Stockholm down to Zurich. As is sometimes the case with some of these remote stands for some of these airlines, there's of course 2 lines for the standard economy class and then the business class, and sometimes the business class line only gets served by one person checking everybody in, so when there's issues it gets a little bogged down. So even though there were only 3 people in front of me in the line, I ended up standing there for about 45 minutes and entirely unnecessarily, because I tried to check in online and Swiss Air said that the city I lived in doesn't exist. I'll figure out if that's true or not when I get home, but I'm hoping the city I live in exists. So if Swiss Air had a better system for online check-in, I could have averted the entire line and not bogged down the system. But I got to say, it wasn't terribly inconvenient. However, it is one of the more slow check-in processes I've ever seen. Granted, not the slowest. Qatar Airways in Doha definitely takes the cake on that, but it's definitely on the slower side of check-in processes. So I'm going to head over to security and then try to find a lounge to hang out until my flight.
With check-in behind me, I made my way through Orlando's security checkpoint, which I was surprised to find only took me a matter of minutes, so I continued on my mission of finding a lounge to lay low for a short time before my flight. While my ticket would have given me access to a Star Alliance lounge, I chose to spend my time in the American Express lounge because online reviews told me that the food was wonderful. I can certainly say I agree after today's meal. While the lounge is more basic than some of its American counterparts, it was very clean and had an elegant style about it, with friendly waitstaff and wonderful food options. After what seemed like a very short hour in the lounge, I was off through the airport, down the jet bridge, and onto the Swiss Air A220 that would take me on to Zurich today. My seat on today's flight is a bit of a common seat amongst the intra-European business class. This seat is not only a bit on the paper-thin side, but it's also a bit narrow as well. Fortunately for me, Swiss Air blocks off middle seats in their intra-European business class, so if you're on the port side of the aircraft like me, you get the whole row to yourself. Unfortunately for me, European carriers, in their desire for flexibility to adapt to changing sales needs, do not offer special business class seats like their Asian or North American counterparts. What this means for me is that since I'm in row 3, my legroom is also a bit on the shorter side. For reference, I'm fairly tall at 6'2" or 188 centimeters. While legroom was fine on this short 2.5-hour flight, it was still a little bit tight. I'd also like to note that these seats do also offer individual air vents, which I was thankful for in the midsummer European heat because you know that with the whole row to myself, I did use both of them. Before long, the jet bridge was pulled away, we pushed back, and the cabin crew started their safety demonstration, aided by the small info screen above each of the seats. While the screen was small, it was nice to have a safety video, even if the plane did not have an in-flight entertainment system. Following a short taxi out to the runway, we took off into the skies over Stockholm, and banked towards the southwest on our way to our destination in Zurich. Despite the short length of this flight, I was surprised to find that Swiss was able to pull out a full flight service. Not long after takeoff, the flight attendant came around offering a drink service. I went with both a glass of water and a glass of sparkling wine. Both were even served in real glass stemware. Not long after that, we were offered a meal. Today I had a gnocchi dish with a small salad, dessert, a roll, and a selection of cheeses. While not the best in-flight meal I've ever had, I was impressed that I got one at all, and I certainly enjoyed it. Swiss Air did an excellent job with the service on this flight. I really appreciate having full service for this short flight, and it's also worth noting that meal service was finished less than an hour after takeoff, giving me plenty of time for a glass of whiskey and a short nap before landing in Zurich. After a good night's sleep, I'm back at Zurich Airport, where I need to once again check into my flight thanks to check-in issues with Swiss Air's online check-in process. Thankfully, check-in at Zurich takes almost no time at all.
I'm here again this morning in Zurich, about to start my transit on to Chicago. I just went ahead and checked in over here, not dropping any bags today. So we're going to hop through security, find a lounge, chill for a couple hours. Then we're going to hop on board our plane and make our way over to Chicago.
Thankfully, before too long, I'm through check-in and security, and despite a bit of a line at passport control, I'm on my way to the business class lounge because this business class lounge in Zurich Airport is certainly one of my favorites. For starters, I love the feel of this lounge. It's well appointed, and it certainly feels like a proper business class lounge. Thanks to my mid-morning departure time, this lounge isn't terribly packed, which is great because it gives me my pick of places to sit. Not only were there plenty of places to sit, but the views of the airport were almost unobstructed since there is a ton of glass in here. Even the bathroom has views of planes waiting to be boarded. All that aside, the best feature by far of this airport lounge is the outdoor terrace. This airport is an absolute plane spotter's dream. As I sat on the terrace drinking a cappuccino, I sat there immersed in every single plane as it made its way down the runway, lifting off the ground right in front of where I was sitting.
So we made our way back over to gate E23 where our plane is boarding. That's the case with most US-bound flights. They kind of have us all marshaled here so they can check our passports again. And now we're just kind of waiting here. So we'll wait for our spot and then make our way on down the jet bridge and get on this A330 that's going to take us on over to Chicago.
And there it is, the shiny white A330 that is going to take us on to Chicago. As I stood there waiting to board, I admired the plane. With what seemed like a lot of confusion and a very inefficient boarding process, I'm off down the jet bridge into the cabin where I'll be for the next 10 hours as I make my way on over to Chicago. As I enter the plane, I'm warmly greeted by a cheerful flight crew who ushered me over to my seat for the duration of this flight. The cabin on Swiss International Airlines A330 features 3 classes of service. At the front of the plane, there is a small first-class cabin containing 8 first-class seats in a 1-2-1 configuration. Behind that, there's a small mini business class cabin with 2 rows of seats, followed by another 8 rows of business class seats after the galley. In total, there are 45 Thomson AeroVantage business class seats. The rows in the business class cabin alternate between rows of 1-2-1 in the even-numbered rows and 2-2-1 configurations in the odd-numbered rows. The even rows contain 1 seat on the port side of the aircraft deemed the throne seat, which offers more space by far, but is often sold in an upcharge by Swiss Air. The next best seat to get would be any seat on the starboard side of the aircraft, with the odd-numbered seats being further from the aisle. As none of those seats were available, I picked seat 6K for this flight, though I'd later find out that I like the aisle side kilo seat since I have very wide shoulders. Behind the business class cabin, there's another 183 economy class seats arranged in a 2-4-2 layout. The arrangement of the Thomson AeroVantage seats offers plenty of space to spread out and plenty of elbow room. While they are only 20.5 inches or 52 centimeters wide, they offer plenty of shoulder space. My shoulders are 24 inches or 61 centimeters wide, and I had absolutely no issues when it came to shoulder space on this plane. I also want to point out that in the seated position, the legroom in this seat is virtually limitless. The footwell in front of the seat is so deep that unless I was in fully flat mode, I really couldn't reach the end of the footwell. This kind of footwell is also incredible for a partially lounged position with the seat, since the slight slope of the footwell kind of works a little bit like a footrest. To the right of the seat on the armrest, there were plenty of controls for the seat, and the seat can be reclined into a number of various positions. There's also a lumbar support button, which I didn't find to work all that well, and a massage button, which worked, though I didn't quite care for it. Behind the seat controls, there's a remote for the IFE screen, which I found to be the best way to operate the IFE, as the touchscreen had a slight lag. I'd also note that on my seat, there's a small part of the seat in front of the remote that was loose and broken, but I kind of just put up with it for the entirety of the flight. At my seat, there was a pillow and a blanket, but since I'm not one to get chilly on long-haul flights, I really didn't even use the blanket. However, since the lumbar support on the seat didn't work, the pillow was greatly appreciated for the extra lumbar support that it provided. When I arrived at my seat, I found a very basic amenity kit made for Swiss Air by Victorinox. It contained a pair of socks, an eye mask, a set of earplugs, some toothpaste with an eco-friendly bamboo toothbrush, and some lip balm. While all of these items are certainly appreciated, there really isn't anything special that Swiss is doing here, at least not anything beyond what is provided by similar airlines on business class flights. Finally settled into my seat, the flight crew came around with a selection of pre-flight beverages, and of course I went with a glass of sparkling wine. This was followed soon after by a warm towel service, which I always appreciate. Flight crew then came around and presented me with a menu, and the flight crew took meal orders before we even pushed back from the stand. Starting out, I certainly felt like the cabin crew had their act together. I was impressed by the wide variety of drink options included in the menu, and it certainly felt like Swiss Air had their act together when they came up with the printed menu for today's flight. Without much delay, we pushed back from the gate, started our long taxi out to the runway, and we took off into the mid-morning skies over Zurich. It doesn't matter how many times I've flown, I always enjoy a chance to ogle at the views below as we distance ourselves from the ground. With the journey started, this was a perfect opportunity for me to recline my seat a bit and relax before the in-flight service began. Fully relaxed in my seat, I was offered a choice of a drink selection, and I chose to go with another glass of sparkling wine. I was asked if I wanted anything else, so I also went with a glass of whiskey. Both were brought out promptly and with a bowl of nuts to snack on as I waited for the meal service. So far, this Swiss Air crew is pulling out all the stops. Even if the cabin is a little bit older, the service certainly makes up for it. At first glance, it's pretty clear to see that the seats in this business class cabin are old, but one place where it really stands out is the in-flight entertainment screens. For starters, these screens are tiny. They're at least 30% smaller than screens on more modern herringbone-style seats. They're also supposedly touchscreen, though I found out that there was so much lag in the screen that I ended up just using the remote controller. As far as the selection goes, however, I will say that there were plenty of movies and shows to choose from. For the main meal on today's flight, I was offered a chicken dish with a balsamic salad, a selection of cheeses, and a roll. While it was a step above the meal I was offered on the shorter regional flight I was on the previous day, it really didn't stand out as a meal on a business class product, and I was a little disappointed in the catering. However, from a service perspective, once again the crew on this flight really shined. Hats off to the Swiss Air crew. Following the main meal, we were offered what might be one of the most simple desserts I've seen on a business class offering. We were only offered a small eclair type dessert. While it was delicious, it seemed a bit tiny for something offered on a flight that can retail for several thousands of dollars. With the meal service behind me, I relaxed for a short while as the cabin crew dimmed the cabin and turned on some red mood lighting. For a daytime flight, I feel like some flight crews make cabins too dark for passengers who may wish to get some work done. I'd say that I think the lighting here was a good compromise, allowing me to get a nap in, but still providing some passengers some light from which to work. As I reclined my seat into the bed position, I was glad I had chosen an aisle seat. Since these seats are only 20.5 inches or 52 centimeters wide, and I am 24 inches or 61 centimeters wide, I was still able to spread out my shoulders a bit towards the aisle. It actually felt like there was plenty of shoulder space in this seat. On the other hand, as far as length goes, it was still a bit tight. As you can see, my head is right against the top of the bed. For reference, I am 74 inches or 188 centimeters tall, and while Swiss Air claims that the seat is 79 inches or 200 centimeters, I didn't have much extra room. As far as the footbox goes, there was plenty of room for me to move my feet around. Awake from my nap, I decided to check out the lavatory and see what Swiss Air offers in terms of the lavatory on its A330. It's a pretty standard offering, however the wood paneling gives a more refined feel to it. Swiss has also stocked the lavatory with a selection of lotions and a face spray for the enjoyment of the passengers. About 2 hours before landing, crew came around with a small snack item. My choice was an Asian noodle dish, which was fine and tasted great. However, I will say that the presentation wasn't the most elegant that I'd ever seen. As we started our approach into Chicago's O'Hare Airport, I thought I'd take a moment and reflect on the product offered by Swiss Air. For starters, I'd have to say that Swiss really shines through the level of service that I received on these 2 flights. Both flight crews were polite, energetic, and attentive to my comfort while I traveled with them. As far as catering went, it was average on both flights. While I didn't mind either meal that I was served, it was far from a top-notch catering experience. Drink selections were great, but mostly just on par with offerings from the rest of the industry. From a hard product perspective, however, there's no denying that this business class product is old and worn. There were several visible blemishes around the seats, broken console panels, and the seat just didn't have the same level of cushioning that it probably had when it was new. Swiss International Airlines is in the process of refurbishing their interiors and is planning on introducing the Swiss Senses cabin in 2025, and I am certainly more than interested in trying out their product with a new cabin so that I can see this airline shine with the potential that I know that they have. Thank you to all of you for coming along with me on today's journey. If you enjoyed the review, hit the like button and subscribe so I can bring you along with me on my future adventures. I look forward to growing the channel and I can't wait to bring you along with me to my next destination. Until I see you next time, have a stellar time in the skies. That's all for now. Until I see you again, so long.